Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up. Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles that I'm in my element. It's evident that there's levels to the game.
So what's happening, people? Welcome back to the Athletes podcast. Today, I'm going back to my roots with my man, Pankil Chander, who is from Wilkes University, just like me. This is an all Colonel episode, so forgive anybody that is listening, but we're going to get into the nitty gritty of what it is to have Colonel Pride. So if you don't like it, so what? You're going to listen because there's going to be a lot of really good stories and a lot of really good insight because that's just what Colonels do. So Pankil, thank you for coming on to the show. Really appreciate it. We had, talked a lot over the years, and obviously I follow what you do. And, you've sent me text messages and we've been on the phone. We've been at NCAAs at the same time, something else that we'll get into as we get through the conversation. But, and I honestly, I gotta let you know that seeing everything that you're doing and knowing that, we met through a phone call with Coach Slogger, Coach Loudon Slogger, the head coach at Wilkes, when he got us connected when you were still at Wilkes as a senior. And now seeing everything you're doing has been really, really cool because it always takes me back to that first conversation that you and I had when you were there and you just wanted to pick my brain, as a former colonel who had moved on. And, I was, kind of knee deep in my career at that point. I think I was like 9-10 years in. Um, and it, like I said, every time I see a post from you doing something big, I always kind of go back to that. And I'm like, man, I'm so proud of this guy. I love everything that he's doing. So happy to see the Wilkes W back on your chest, something else that we'll get into. But I want to start out with, before we even getting into the coaching side of your side of athletics and what got you into sports. So, as I ask everybody, why sports? What is your sports why? And what made you want to be an athlete growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I mean, we'll dive into a lot of things, and I remember that call. That was I remember I reached out to you. I think it was my going into my senior year of college, and I was just grateful you were so generous with your time at that point. I know you were working for Flow Wrestling, and again knee deep in your career, and I'd see on Flow Wrestling all the time, right? Those top five highlights, right? And so it was cool, man. Just it's been cool seeing the great work that you're continuing to do. And but yeah, I think my sports why has kind of been stable throughout my whole career, even as I've grown and some of my maybe insights have informed new philosophies as a coach, but the grounding philosophy has always been the same, which is I think sport is that vehicle to um, develop great people, right? I always thought of the wrestling room as like a classroom. Even when I was an athlete, right? I felt like the most impactful education I got as an athlete, as a wrestler, was not always in the classroom, even though it was, right. But it was in the wrestling room, and I felt like through wrestling, I really learned how to critically think. I learned how to build resiliency. I learned how to work hard. I learned how to be humble and really reframe negative experiences or adverse experiences into something that was positive and meaningful and productive, right? I learned how to take experiences that really I didn't always want, and make them favorable, right? Or make them productive. So I think sport is always a vehicle to just develop better people and to learn life lessons that really transcend your time in sport, right? Obviously, when you're in the wrestling room, you're trying to keep your pace high. You're trying to have as clean of a finish on your single leg and your setups and all those things. But that process of thinking about how to do that stuff is really that process of continual improvement and how you think about improving. And then once I really got done with once I really learned how to apply that skill set outside of the wrestling room, that's when I really started to experience a lot of success off the bat. I was an okay high school student and probably underachieved a little bit because I didn't apply myself enough. And when I got to college, I learned quickly that I had to use that skill set and really use it to transcend wrestling and use it in a productive way off the mat. And I think that's what wrestling did for me. I don't want to be dramatic or hyperbolic and say like wrestling saved my life, but in a lot of ways, I think it did. I don't really know where I'd be without wrestling.
Mhm.
And now I think I'm at a place that if I were to ever walk away from the sport, I'd use the life lessons that I learned through wrestling and continue to experience improvement because that's now how that's kind of how I'm wired now, right? Through conditioning of that mindset. So over and over again, so that's kind of I guess my why. I know it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think there's a lot of value in sport that transcends sport itself.
Mhm. So you're a New York guy,
Yeah.
where wrestling got a lot of great wrestlers from New York. There's a lot of people there, but what pushed you into the wrestling room instead of, maybe the baseball diamond or onto the football field? What was it about wrestling? Because I mean, in New York, you've got, I mean, let's put a caveat on it. You've got kind of two NFL football teams. There's one that's in, they play in Jersey, but you get two New York football teams, right? And football's a very big deal, especially here in the United States, where everybody gravitates towards it. I did for sure, even though I was a wrestler, all my life. Football was what I did when I got to Wilkes. What was it about wrestling for you that made you want to push to get to that next level once you went on to college?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan, because Long Island is kind of I grew up in Long Island, New York, Southwest Long Island, New York. I went to a small high school called Lawrence High School in the Five Towns area, and and we had a lot of athletes come through there, but I would say we were predominantly a football school at that time, a little bit of a bigger school, and we had I had kids that I went to or guys that I went to high school with that were on a Long Island championship team, and that was football was kind of that big premier kind of flagship program at our high school. So, but I also was very small growing up. Like I was not I don't even think I weighed 100 pounds till probably my junior year of high school, right? Or maybe my sophomore year of high school. So I was, I played football in seventh and eighth grade in middle school and lacrosse and then got into wrestling too. And obviously there was some limitations there with being competitive in football when you're less than 100 pounds in middle school or maybe even lacrosse. But even still, I was able to, use that skill set from wrestling and apply it in football and lacrosse and be somewhat competitive. Nothing crazy, but enough to enjoy it and feel like I was, adding value and on the field. And I first got introduced to wrestling through my brother, actually, who's not in athletics in any way. He actually has a PhD from Johns Hopkins in a completely different field in chemistry, right? But he actually is the first person who kind of introduced me to wrestling in a sense. So I'm really thankful for my only sibling, my older brother, who one day he was at wrestling practice, I think just giving it a try in intramurals, and I was like, I remember I came home and asked my mom where my brother was because he's usually home, and she said, "Well, he's at wrestling practice." I was like, and we used to watch WWE a lot, and I thought that's maybe the spirit of what he was doing, and then obviously I went to the gym teacher, a PE teacher who is actually has been a longtime mentor. My first ever wrestling coach, John Sarland. He wrestled at Hofstra University and was a Division I wrestler there on Long Island, and then he was a PE teacher for a long time in our district, and my first ever wrestling coach, and still to this day I talk to him. Whenever I'm home on Long Island, we get together. So I was lucky that I had a really good, really great coach to introduce me to the sport that valued the right things in development. And so he was probably the first person that got me to think in a way that was more introspective, more cerebral about the sport and not just the surface level, transactional outcome piece of wrestling, right? So that was kind of that first introduction. I was in sixth or seventh grade in middle school, and so I started a little bit late. And then obviously wrestling was really that one sport right away. I had at least relative to football and lacrosse, a lot of success pretty much right away, and that was because I was able to compete with, opponents of my size, right? So that was something that really drew me to the sport, and then when I had started to taste a little bit of success, and I felt like I was doing it completely on my own because that's how, that's just the nature of wrestling, right? That one-on-one individual nature of combat. So, that's kind of what drew me to it. I love that introspective piece to it. I knew that anytime I took a lick or loss or whatever it was, took a beating, like it was all on me, right? So anytime I tasted some success, I felt more confident. So it was probably like the wrestling dopamine, so to speak, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of drew me in, and I didn't really experience that in any other sport, um, and I still got the team aspect, that teammate camaraderie through wrestling. So once I kind of got roped in and started to, get a taste of success, and felt like I could be in charge of my own development because, YouTube, right? Like John Sauerland would say all the time, like, hey, go watch, Nikhil Sanderson NCAA finals match if you want to learn how to ankle pick or do, whatever, right? Like I was like, well, I could just watch this and get better, just by watching it, right, or digesting it, and not that that's not true in other sports, but I just felt it was more of a immediate development, and more direct development through wrestling, and it's something that I could take really, ownership of in a meaningful way, and it became something that I came to love, and never really looked back on.
Mm-hmm. So as you're going throughout your career, you're having success. You said you're a Long Island guy. Hofstra's right there. Your coach went to Hofstra, and you could easily be another number at a Division I school if you wanted to. That's literally right there in your backyard. But how did you know that the Division III route was the route for you? And how did that process kind of take shape as you started to discover, the Wilkes, the Del Val's, the Susquehanna, the different schools that were, I think Division III, we've got what, 140 or some or so, or 180 so schools that are Division III. How did you go through that process of figuring out that instead of just being a number, maybe walking on at Hofstra, that you were going to go to a Division III school where you were going to have a very different atmosphere and a very different experience like the one that you had at Wilkes?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I wasn't, I was probably better than I gave myself credit for. I think, one of the things I emphasize a lot in as a coach right now is that sports psychology piece, and making sure that mindset training is really important to any athletes that I coach, and make sure I weave that into to everything I do, because I think, and not that, and I had great coaches that did that as well, but and I knew how important that was, and I think that sometimes that probably limited my performances. I was a pretty good wrestler, and saw myself underperforming in some situations, so I probably didn't get those Division I looks. Well, I definitely didn't get those Division I looks that maybe I thought I was capable of, and maybe even some of my coaches thought I was capable of, but that was okay because there was plenty of great wrestlers on Long Island, right, that went to great Division III programs, right, like in Ithaca College. So, and I remember there were several great Long Island guys that I kind of grew up, watching, admiring, and going to some great Division III programs in the Northeast, and then I started to really think about that as a great option, and then obviously I got some correspondence from a couple of D3 programs when I was kind of getting into my latter years of high school, and I was like, man, this is a great option. There's guys that are New York State runner-ups and New York State champs that are going Division III, right? So, I was like, well, no one's too good for D3, right? This is a great level. It's a very competitive level. It's a great place to have a holistic experience, and really be, again, take responsibility for your own success, right? That process that I loved about why I got into wrestling was this idea that I could be responsible for my own development, and I felt like at Division III I was going to continue to have that experience, and also be part of a great wrestling program at the time. when I got initial correspondence from Wilkes Wrestling. They were coming off a great year. They just had a national runner-up in Chris Krawchuk, and they were coming into the year, being a top 10 team. So I was like, man, this is, I hadn't really heard of Wilkes before that. And then when I kind of learned of it, I was like, man, this is a phenomenal institution and just a historic wrestling program, right? So, and it was in Northeast Pennsylvania, one of the hotbeds of wrestling, right? So I was like, this is a great move. This is my own move, right? I didn't follow the path of, not that would be an issue, but I didn't follow the path of maybe some of my club teammates or someone that, every other Long Island kid was going to. I was one of the few Long Island guys that was wrestlers that was going to Wilkes University Wrestling, right? There's been others in the past, but not many, right? And so, so I felt like I was like, man, this is something that's my own, and I would be the first in my family to be a college athlete and do that kind of thing. So I was like, this is just a phenomenal opportunity, and it was a great fit. You walk into Wilkes University Athletics' facility. It's March Gym is a great indoor space to host wrestling dual meets and tournaments. And then you walk down to the John Reese Wrestling Facility, and it's essentially a 3-mat wrestling room adjacent to a beautiful indoor turf and next to a varsity weight room with 3 full-time strength coaches. I was like, man, this is to me, it's like Frosty Weathering, right? Making big time where you're at. I was like, this is a big time athletics to me. Division 1, 2, 3. What it is, what it is, man. I was like, we basically got a Division 1 facility for all I know, and we had a couple, Division 1 transfers on the team, and so I was like, man, this is a great kind of hub of wrestling and a great opportunity, and really, from an academic standpoint, like I said, I probably didn't apply myself the way I needed to in high school, and I was probably I was a little bit of an overachiever for even getting admitted to Wilkes. And then when I got there, it was like, I really applied myself and was above a 3.0 student throughout my whole time there, and was a Scholar All-American, right? And so it was just this transformative kind of experience. And I think wrestling, I wouldn't have got to Wilkes University, a great school, outside of the athletic programs, right? Obviously the athletic programs are a big piece, but Wilkes University is just a great institution, and we really wouldn't have gotten there without the gate that was opening and closing through wrestling, right? So John Laudenslager is the gatekeeper, right? So
Yeah.
so he was a gatekeeper of a transformational experience, and I think that's the power of college coaches, right? Like we're developers, we're recruiters, et cetera, but we're gatekeepers, right? Like the gateway to almost changing my life in so many ways and giving me a transformational experience and influencing my career path was the gateway of getting recruited to a college wrestling program. And so obviously that's my lens, and it's probably a little biased from as a college coach and someone who was positively impacted by that experience. But that's what coaches are. They're gatekeepers, and we're the ones opening and closing it. As United colleague at Springfield College, Colleen O'Connell, she was assistant women's basketball coach, and has been to 2 Sweet 16s as a coach, and she did some of her research surrounding this, and that's kind of where I took it from, right? But it was she's right, and her research was right about that too. It's like we're gatekeepers, and when I got to Wilkes, it opened me. I took my first visit. I got to see obviously the great business major that we have here. That's now an accredited, nationally accredited program, right? I got to see the great athletic facilities. I got to meet some of the guys on the team. I got to, meet some of the professors. And then, once you get done with that experience, you're like, man, this is a place that's going to care about you in a 360 way, right? It's not just going to be about wrestling. So that's kind of what drew me to that Division III model. And and not to say that Division I isn't like that, but I think it could sometimes be a little bit, in some ways, bigger Division I programs sometimes could be a little siloed, and you could only be wrestling all 365 all year round, right? And again, that's not a bad thing if that's what you want, but I wanted to make sure that I was in a place that was going to be an intimate learning environment and something that was going to really support my growth holistically. And Wilkes University in Division III was the perfect fit for that.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I can attest to that, and I got to Wilkes because my brother was there. You know, my brother and I are 8.5 years apart, so that's how I knew about Wilkes. And the same coaches that were recruiting him, or at least the same coach that was recruiting him, recruited
Mhm.
me, right? So it was a familiarity of the campus, and everything that I had seen from the time I was 8 to 17 when I first got that recruiting visit
Yep.
as a senior in high school, it was all the same. I mean, I think the campus had changed. They
Mhm.
had, the campus had grown, but that holistic environment that you just spoke about
Mhm.
was there, and it's what I wanted, right? And I had to choose between football and wrestling, and I ultimately chose football because it just felt like that campus just felt like home, and it always did. And no matter how many new buildings are there now, it still does when whenever I have a chance to visit, and I'm sure that that's probably why you find yourself back there. But I want to, before getting into how you find your way back to Wilkes, I want to go with, how did you find your way into a coaching chair? You just left a Penn College where you were the head coach, but before that you were at Springfield as well as Gettysburg. You left Springfield with a master's degree.
Mhm.
Were all of these things on your list of goals when you got out of college, or did they really start to come to fruition as your competition career at Wilkes started to wind down?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, Ryan, I mean that's part of why I reached out to you, my going into my junior year of college, right? Because I mean, senior year of college after I ended my junior year, because I was like, maybe I want to go on that athletic communications route, maybe sports communications, right? I was a sport management major. They had just added it, I think, my sophomore year, so I was one of like the first kind of cohorts that came through. The program's a lot more fleshed out now, and it's a great sport management program. And but I obviously used my degree right in the field that I got a job in my chosen degree field. So, but that's what initially what I thought. I loved the idea of marketing and telling the story, and I knew that's what obviously you were great at doing. I was like, man, and he's a Wilkes grad. I was like, this is a no brainer. Like, I gotta at least reach out to him and pick his brain, and I still love that element of it. And I try to do that as a coach, as so that we were marketing our programs, marketing any program or athlete, or telling that story, so that we were separating ourselves from other programs that maybe aren't doing that, right? So um, I think I think that was that was a big part of it, right? I was like, man, this is a you could have such a diverse skill set, or develop such a diverse skill set through coaching. So in sport management programs, you take all the the all the kind of holistic classes that encompass anything with athletics, whether that's sports law or a facilities class or whatever it is, right? Coaching. And so for me, as soon as I started kind of getting into my senior year and started looking at that next step, I wrote for the Beacon a little bit, right? Like I know you did as a student, right? The
Mhm.
student newspaper, and did some things for Wilkes Athletics, some feature stories and things like that. And I was like, man, maybe there's more to this than I realize. And I remember I went to a couple regional and one national kind of NCAA event that kind of opened my eyes to other gateways. And I was like, man, I didn't realize how fleshed out the industry was, right? Maybe it was a little green and naive in that sense. And I realized how much opportunity is really out there in intercollegiate athletics. And so as I continue to do it and kind of get involved, my senior year, I was on the board for the event planning committee and board for PJWs that was hosted at Mohegan Sun Arena here in Wilkes-Barre. And it's kind of funny how full circle that moment comes, because that was 7.5 years ago, or I guess a little over, probably closer to 8 years ago now. But I was a student at my senior year, and that was kind of like an internship, and we're hosting this huge event for Pennsylvania junior states. And one of the things that we wanted to do was bring a dignitary to the event. And women's wrestling was really taking off at that time, and really starting to really get legs underneath it to at a major level. And so we were like, well, we gotta try to bring a great female wrestler here as a guest speaker, or a dignitary, right? And so at the time, I had done my junior year, I had done an internship with A6 Wrestling back on Long Island. That was kind of a contact that I had through my first ever wrestling coach in middle school, John Satterland. He had a buddy at Hofstra named Nick Gallo, who at the time was, doing some work with ASICS Wrestling, and kind of got linked up with him. And Adeline Gray was signed to ASICS Wrestling at the time. And so we were able to get Adeline to come out to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, to be a dignitary at the Pennsylvania Junior States, right? And that was an awesome experience. I was like, man, being able to see the impact she had and on kids, and host all the logistics behind planning that event. I was like, man, event planning is kind of fun. Communications is kind of fun, And I was like, what am I going to do here? I knew I loved wrestling. Wrestling's kind of fun, right? Being in the wrestling room was kind of fun. I was like, what kind of blends all these together? And it's staring me right in the face, and it's coaching, right? So I was like, man, as a coach, I can be in the wrestling room, run practice, help guys develop, and I can recruit, because I could, I loved that element of it. I was an admissions ambassador for Wilkes University, so I used to give tours to prospective students all the time, and so I developed that recruiting kind of muscle there. I love planning events, which is obviously a big part of being a coach, right? You got to be able to build a good schedule and consider a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts in planning events and hosting tournaments, and you got to be able to market and tell a story to effectively recruit for your program. And so I was like, man, coach, being a college coach encompasses all these things that I've really enjoyed doing in my kind of immersive experiences as a student. Kind of as I was approaching the end of my senior year, applied to a couple different grad assistant jobs, right? Whatever, assistant jobs, and nothing really was shaking out. I didn't really have any experience, right? I was just coming out as a college wrestler. I wasn't a world beater by any means, right? So, I didn't have that all-American piece to sell or whatever. So it was a little bit tough trying to break in. And, at the time I reached out to Coach Gordon at Bloomsburg University and Russ Hughes, and they were generous enough to at least let me be a volunteer on staff, and it was just another hand to help. I didn't get paid, or I was probably only around in a limited capacity, but I was able to get some exposure to it and be involved in some way. And I was working in student affairs, kind of cutting my teeth, trying to get into coaching. So I spent a year at Bloomsburg, just taking some grad classes, and I've had an unconventional path, right? I went, took some grad classes, and I actually left grad school to take a full-time assistant job after that year of experience at Gettysburg College. So that was kind of my first kind of full breakout into college athletics, I would say. And so I had my first full-time gig as an assistant coach at Gettysburg College, and that was a great experience. Gettysburg College is one of the most highly regarded, I think, athletic departments in the country. It's a pretty traditionally, historically, in a stable way, in the top 100 in the Directors Cup every year in Division III, right? So pretty strong athletic department in the Centennial Conference, and was able to get a lot of great experiences there. Was able to do all those things that I love, and work under pretty solid head coach under Coach Andy Bogle, who who's been a coach for a long time, and he was a great wrestler at LaSalle University. So I got some great experiences at Gettysburg College, and Coach Vogel had transitioned out, and at that time I had the opportunity to stay at Gettysburg and lead a program, but COVID kind of was taking shape, and I was pretty young at the time. I wasn't even 25 years old yet, and I was like, man, maybe I just need to go do a different experience, get a master's, and learn, keep learning, right? So I went up to Springfield College in Western Massachusetts to get my master's of science in athletic administration, and I was able to get the best of both worlds there, where I was able to get my master's degree for free, and be a teaching fellow in the physical education department, and teach and coach, obviously be essentially full-time assistant at Springfield College's wrestling program, which is another storied program similar to Wilkes University wrestling. So in Springfield College, I know we talked about different divisions earlier, like Springfield College athletics, for anyone who doesn't maybe know it or familiar with it or been there, is a almost like Division I resources in a Division III athletic department, right? It is an athletic breeding ground, and primarily because of the academic programs that separate Springfield, right? So physical education and exercise science and sports biology, right? Like there's a doctoral program in sport and exercise psychology. There's a graduate program specifically for strength and conditioning, right? So exercise physiology, athletic counseling, right? So you have so many people that are moving across the country to go to Springfield to get a grad degree because of how well it sets them up in whether it's intercollegiate athletics or professional athletics. And so I was around a lot of great sport minds there between coaches and faculty members. So I was able to get some great experiences. I worked under a great head coach in Dr. Jay Holder, who wrestled at Boston University for Carl Adams, and then I was an assistant under Daryl Arroyo at Springfield for a couple of years, and then took over. And I'd say Springfield was a place where I really found my voice as a coach. It was only my second kind of full-time coaching gig, right? And I was able to kind of find my voice. Jay really was able to, he was great with taking a step back and letting his assistants coach and make mistakes and giving them space to do that. And I was really comfortable working with him and leading with him, right? And the guys that the student athletes at Springfield are great because they're so athletic minded, right? More than half the guys that come there to go there are majoring in PE, and they care about they love learning about anatomy. They love learning about how the human body responds to different styles of coaching or nutrition or strength and conditioning, right? So we had a great strength and conditioning hub there, so I learned a lot from Dr. Brian Thompson. In 2022, he actually won the NCAA College Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year award, right? And has developed some phenomenal strength coaches who are leading in the industry. So I was just around some really great people and learned a lot. Kind of found my voice as a coach there, and was able to get a lot of reps and doing everything that I wanted to do. And then when I kind of transitioned out of finishing up my master's degree in athletic administration at Springfield, obviously at that point you kind of get on the job search. I honestly toyed with the idea of staying there because I loved it so much and maybe getting my doctorate, right? But then I wrote a master's thesis and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm I'm ready to write a dissertation. So I kind of tabled that idea, and so I applied to some jobs, and at the time there's several opportunities that were interested in me that I was interested in, and then Penn College of Technology in North Central Pennsylvania kind of surfaced on my radar because it was a newer program, newer Division III athletic department that was seemingly getting some momentum and how they were developing their athletic program. And obviously I what I learned through my lens at Springfield and Gettysburg and at Wilkes was like, man, recruiting's the number one factor and key performance indicator in developing a program, right? If you cannot recruit great athletes to the school because of various factors, whether that's institutional climate, whether that's majors, whether that's financial aid, whether that's location, whatever it is, right? All those factors kind of play a role in the success of a program. So I felt like Penn, at the time, Penn College had a lot of those factors that I thought were important in developing a successful program, and I was right, and that still holds true, right? I mean, it was obviously it's in the hotbed of wrestling in Central Pennsylvania, and had some great 4-year trade and technical and hands-on majors that really separated itself from other institutions, and it was a newer program, and there was an opportunity to really inject a lot of energy and belief and intensity into a program that had really not seen much success, prior to me getting there, and took a little bit of a leap of faith, right? A bet on myself because I'd been at some more established athletic programs, but I knew it was an opportunity. I knew that you don't need all the fancy stuff if you're willing to work and if you have the right. If you could package the product in the right way and have the right product in an authentic way that's going to impact people and be meaningful. So, so I took over a program at the time, and I think it was June 22, and And so, I mean, we had a winning dual record, no guy at the NCAA tournament, didn't really have too many guys with, too much success academically. We didn't have a 3.0 team GPA before I got there. So, quickly after 2 years, we had 2 seasons there as a head coach. We were able to have 4 consecutive seasons of a 3-point team GPA or above. We had a first guy at the NCAA tournament, first winning dual record, first tournament team championship, right? We had the largest roster. We recruited the largest roster and retained the largest roster in program history. So we were top 25, on and off the mat. So we were in and out of the top 25 my second season with primarily a group of freshman starters that I recruited, and then we were top 25 academically too. So so we kind of turned a lot of things around there with the right intensity and belief and just work ethic, right? Just constantly showing guys how much you care about coaching them and building them up and building the program and the community around it, right? So and then Wilkes University got a new athletic director in Scott Musa, who's been a tremendous addition to athletics here at Wilkes, and Coach John Loudensager, who I wrestled for, who I know tried to get you to wrestle
a couple of times,
right,
yeah,
all the time, right? So he knew who you were, and so he's like, man, we gotta try to get Ryan Holmes to wrestle. He would always joke around about that, right? So, but
yeah,
he's so personable, and he, me and him stayed in touch really throughout ever since I left Wilkes, right? He's been kind of one of my go-to mentors and go-to guys that I call if I ever have maybe a challenge that I'm dealing with from a coaching front or a question I have or someone to bounce ideas off of. He's always kind of been that go-to guy for me, and so we've talked about this for the last 7 years or so, like jokingly, like tongue in cheek, right? Like, hey, if I could ever come back to Wilkes, I'd love to. If we could ever bring you back, we'd love to, right? And just wasn't really able to happen at the time, and at least the last couple of years. Him and Scott Moose approached me about a great opportunity to be the associate head men's coach here at Wilkes University. It was a new position, and and then obviously with the addition of women's wrestling coming to Wilkes, it kind of all made sense, to bring another full-time men's coach on board that can really focus on running and recruiting the men's program in addition to Coach Loudensager, but also while he's able to focus a lot of his energy now on launching the women's program off the ground, and as we focus on hiring a women's coach within this upcoming academic year and then the new year in 2025. So then we'll launch our first season 25-26, right? So my charge is kind of to do everything I've been doing at all these other men's wrestling programs and just recruit, run the program, obviously, be a support system academically for guys and build community around the program, just like he's continued to do in such a phenomenal way. So there's not much, I don't think that I'm going to really add, just kind of continue to do what the great work that, Coach Loudensager has always done at Wilkes Wrestling. So, so when the opportunity to come back kind of presented itself and, everything just made sense. It's second home for me, and always a place that I felt like did things really, really well. And all the success that I've had at all these other stops was really designed off the Wilkes system, right? Wilkes wrestling system. So, when I was at Springfield, we were in and out of the top 25 there. At Gettysburg, we had our first national top 25 ranking there. And then at Penn College, we did too. And so, like, there's common ingredient. Every place that I've been, we kind of been a part of, at least getting in a national conversation and getting more competitive on a national scale. And I think that really is a credit to a lot of the things I learned at Wilkes Wrestling and the system that I learned here, that's done here, that I was able to apply at those other places. And so it's like it's a no-brainer, we have several, college coaches that at least in Division III that have come through Wilkes Wrestling. So it's like, this is a great place. Why not go back to a place where it all started, a place where I can really see myself, in a long-term situation, after having so many great experiences at various places and for 2-3 year stints. And now I'm, at a place where I'm, feeling like this is a really great long-term move so I'm excited about the future, and that's kind of how I ended up there. I know it was a little long-winded, so I try to abbreviate that as much as possible, but that's I guess I got kind of have the gift of the gap, so to speak. But yeah,
I mean,
got back here.
here's the thing about it, right? Is you're showcasing how much you've had to pivot, how much you've learned, all the different environments that you've been in, the impactful places that you've been. So like that's the incredible part for me is just hearing the journey, because the journey is always different for every single person. It's something that I told you, before we came on. I love having different people on here because there is not one sports story that is identical to another. We may have gone to the same school, but the way that you got there and the way that I got there were two totally different things. We had two totally different experiences, even though we were around a lot of the same people. The athletic director that was yours that when you were there as an athlete was the same for me. Coach Slauger was also there when I was there, trying to recruit me, trying to get me to wrestle. I was very close my junior year, but just a little too banged up coming off a football season to put the singlet back on. But like I said, it's the journey that I love hearing about, and love hearing like the impact that you've made every single place that you've gone and how it's shaped and molded you. And one of the things that I kept hearing you talk about was recruiting. And you said, you guys are the gatekeepers to a lot when it comes to these athletes. So I want to dig into recruiting. And, when you first started, right, you take that first recruiting trip, and I'm sure you've rehearsed your pitch in the mirror, and you're ready to kind of give your pitch to that first student athlete. And obviously it gets easier from there on, but as you're honing your craft as a recruiter, how did these different attributes of all these different places start to come to light, right? Because like I said, you're giving your pitch of why your school is for whoever you're sitting across from. And at some point, somebody did that for you, whether it be Coach Slauger or somebody else. Somebody did that for you. So you're pulling from what you know from your experience. But now as, a more seasoned person, as I would say, more seasoned recruiter, your pitch is very different. It's more honed in. You're more to the point. You have all those things down. But what is it about recruiting that you can say always changes, and things that you have learned along the way that have really honed that craft for you whenever you're sitting in front of, that 17, 18, 19-year-old kid and their parents?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we're meeting kids where they're at, and families where they're at in the process. I think constantly changes, and maybe not so much with the landscape. I think maybe with just lived experiences with athletic recruiting, right? Obviously, we're coming across, and you kind of got to flex your pitch, as you want to call, right? Whatever it is, like what you got to flex that based on who you're around, and in terms of, but always the consistent message, but it's maybe got to be delivered in a different way to different groups, right? And so I think the value that I've kind of gained through all those experiences, really having context, right? And lived experiences through multiple different institutional types and climates and facilities, ways different programs are run, different locations. I've been around. I mean, doing it 7 or 8 years now, but seven years, so 7 seasons. But the thing I'm now kind of getting to the point where I've seen multiple guys go off and graduate, and that I've coached, and now obviously keep up with them all on social media, whether I'm at those programs or not, right? So seeing them all kind of mature through their college careers and go off and have successful careers at all these other schools, those are the kind of things that I'm able to communicate and really provide context to most families on things. And then, because I think at the end of the day, especially Division III, and any college really, and I know even Division I, it's very unlikely to get a full scholarship in wrestling, right? It's an equivalency sport, and I know that's changed, right, with this new legislation. But this, the likelihood of getting a full ride is probably in that minority, right? Like there's very few guys that are getting maybe a full ride for wrestling. So at least from an athletic scholarship, right? They're stacking maybe at academic money on top of it, whatever it is. So for what it's worth, I mean, college is an investment, right? Like let's just boil it down to what it really is. It's an investment, and then the question becomes is what's the best return on investment, and that answer is gonna be different for every family and every kid, right? So I think that constantly changes, right? And so being able to guide a family through prospective student athlete through what's going to be the best informed decision for them. All it comes down to is really, being almost like a consultant, right? Like, is this school a right fit for you? Is the location a right fit for you? But for me, I'm able to provide a lot of context and really be honest with anyone I talk to. And I'll be honest about our weaknesses, I know a lot of people might not, want to hear me say that, but I'll be honest about our limitations. Like, yeah, we don't have that major, or we're probably not going to offer it the same way that this other place does. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that kid or that recruit makes the best decision for themselves, right? And obviously, you're competitors, and you want to maybe get that that highly touted prospect or a kid that you think could be really impactful for your program. But at the end of the day, you want each kid and each family to make the best decision for themselves. And if that aligns with also choosing Wilkes Wrestling or whatever on any other school that I've been at, then it's a win-win for everyone, right? So we just try to. I would say that's probably a grounding. We have our coaching philosophy. I'd say that's a recruiting philosophy too, is to make sure that that I am guiding them to make the best decision for themselves, for their career interests, for their academic fit, for their social fit, the wrestling fit, right? So tell guys all the time that you can't make decisions for just wrestling alone. Obviously, that's going to be big, right? Or athletics alone. And if that's a priority for you, then that's great. And you got to make it on the academic program first. And then the school first, right? Independent of athletics. And then once you have some interest independent of athletics, I think we can really, start to narrow in on how impactful wrestling and the athletic experience can be through this process. And I don't think that's taking away from the value of athletics if I say that, because we're still the gatekeepers, right? We're still the first point of contact they had with the institution, right, or the college or whatever it is. So I always want to just make sure they're making the right decision for themselves, and that it's that they're thinking. It's kind of like covering turning stones, right? Just making sure they're leaving no stone unturned when they're making that decision, and making sure you're really providing a perspective at every angle, because that's what you got to cover as a recruiter, right? You're going to obviously recruit the PSA that you want in your program to be an athlete in, and but obviously their families and maybe their high school coaches or club coaches or whoever it is. There's a lot of different perspectives that have questions, that want answers, that want to be considered in the decision. So. And I have a lot of context just because of all the places I've been. I haven't just maybe been at, again, I haven't just been at one place for, several decades, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? Coach Lonsog has been at Wilkes for now, he's going into his 22nd year at the helm, right? So I think he has a lot of great context because he's seen Wilkes evolve over the last 20 plus years, because he was also he's also an athlete here, right? So there's value in that perspective too. So I think that context that I have, really understanding different institutional types and climates, and academic fits, different types of, and obviously how financial aid plays a factor. Obviously, there's no athletic aid at our level, but obviously the affordability of college is a big piece, and merit scholarships and need-based aid. What schools are more positioned to support students in a well-rounded way, that's available to all students, right? In Division III, that's kind of, like I said, there's no athletic scholarships, but you see some of the best programs at the Division III level are also some of the most affordable options, right? So there's that piece to it too, because college is expensive, right?
Mhm.
So we there's a lot of different factors that come into I think how each prospect makes a decision or comes to a decision and commitment. And then obviously I think the coaching staff and the wrestlers in the program and the wrestling program itself plays a huge role in that, right? And I think at Wilkes we have a really great wrestling product and a great history. And we have, Coach Lonsard was a wrestling alum here. He wrestled at Wilkes when it was Division I, and then I'm obviously an alum, and we got two other volunteer assistants on staff that are alums, and we're not from Wilkes-Barre, any of us, right? We're kind of here and kind of developed some roots here, and because of Wilkes University and the experience we had, and now we're sticking around the program. So I think that's pretty uncommon at a lot of places, right? Like how many college coaching staffs can we name that are the head coach and associate head coach are also, and some assistants or all other assistants are also alumni of that school and program. So I think that's pretty unique. I don't want to dive too much into that, but I think there's a lot of unique things about where Wilkes wrestling is at, especially right now, and kind of where it's been. So. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I wanna move into something else that you touched on of the Division I level has some different recruiting structure around it, right? Like you can only reach out to a kid during a certain grace period. Division III doesn't have those types of things. You guys can start reaching out to a kid, I think, at the end of their sophomore year or as early as their sophomore year. So the things are very different. But one of the biggest topics and something that we've discussed on this show, myself and the co-founders Reid and Justin have discussed, is the new legislation that you just touched on as well, and how that affects mostly the Division I athletes and the Division I community. But when you guys at the Division III level see these different things, how do they affect you? Is this something that you guys pay attention to, or is it something that you're like, oh, okay, that's what's happening on that level? I wonder if it ever makes it this far, or is it just kind of another headline for you guys? Is it something that you guys truly pay attention to, or does it really not have much of an impact because all these legislations, the conversations aren't happening with Division III athletes in mind. They're not even truly happening with all Division I athletes in mind. They're really circulated around basketball, football, maybe some softball for certain programs, maybe some soccer for some other programs as well. So Division III isn't really part of that landscape. Neither is Division II. So when you hear about the new legislation, you hear about NIL, you hear about, revenue sharing, you hear about a lot of these different things. Is this something that you guys keep in the back of your mind, or is it something that you say, that doesn't really truly affect us very much?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, it kind of remains to be seen. I think all, any of this new legislation definitely affects us. I mean, you see name, image, likeness. Obviously, we haven't seen that maybe affect Division III the same way it has in Division I, obviously, but obviously NIL exists in Division III, right? And that's maturing a little bit more, but in Division III at least, we've seen some Division III athletic departments really, really leverage that to their advantage, and then obviously this new legislation, again, it remains to be seen. I don't want to misspeak or assume or speculate on or predict anything that could happen, right? I think it's going to be interesting. I think if I were to just on the surface, I would say, if there's limited opportunities in Division I, if the opportunities to be on a Division I wrestling roster are now going to be limited, that's probably going to trickle down to the Division III level, right? Where now all those kids are maybe a roster guy, so to speak, for lack of a better term, right? Maybe an additional guy to help APR or or be a practice partner, is now going to trickle down to Division 3 and really because they won't have any Division 1 options or won't have the same Division 1 options, right? So maybe you'll see Division 3 wrestling get a little bit higher caliber of or more Division 1 caliber guys at the Division 3 level. I don't know. That's maybe on the surface how I kind of potentially see that unfolding. But I could be totally off on that and be totally missing the mark on the legislation. I don't know. We'll see. I guess it remains to be seen. I don't want to act like I have the future predicted by any means for it. But I think on the surface, with some of the, and then I think it's about constraints, right? How do constraints affect outcomes? Like, so they're putting constraints on Division 1 wrestling rosters. That's going to bounce out some athletes to go to other programs and probably at, the Division 2 and 3 level, I imagine, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I see it. I don't know. Is that something that you've considered?
I have, and as a Division 3 athlete that works primarily in the Division 1 space, and I told you this, as much as I can advocate for, not just Wilkes, but the Division 3 level, I'm going to, because it made me the person that I am, right? Like my Wilkes football helmet is literally right there behind me. You know what I mean? Like I wore that helmet for 4 years, and yeah, I was 26. 26 was the number I wore, and I wore the helmet for 4 years, right? And it was such a huge part of my life and shaped and molded, literally who I am today. That when I look and see, that I was able to compete at the Division 3 level. Could I have gone Division 2 and maybe never seen the field? Maybe. Been a practice player type guy? Maybe. Right. So when you see these constraints and things, you're thinking, maybe a guy that wants to compete who would normally be this practice player or or partner in the room will start to consider the Division 2s, the Division 3s, the NAIAs, right? Like, so maybe like you said, it will have this kind of trickle down effect where you do start to see more of the talent start to spread out. And then on top of that, I would love to start seeing athletic scholarships start to hit the Division 3 level, right? Like I wasn't able to get one. When I was being recruited in 2005, which is damn near 20 years ago at this point. But it's something that I would love to see these athletes start to get, right? And if the restrictions that are happening now, or at least going to be taking shape in 25, 26 on rosters all over the country, and you start to see these high level athletes who can't make a team just want to compete. Because we have seen Division 3, Division 2, HBCU athletes that have gone on to the professional ranks, right? There's been a number of them that have gone to smaller schools that have still made it onto rosters on NFL teams. Maybe you start to see the trickle down of the money as well, where there is a high level athlete that happens to be on a Division 2 squad or a Division 3 squad. And now the schools are thinking that it is a more of a competitive landscape where there are guys that are thinking that they can't make a Division 1 roster, right? Even though the roster caps for football, specifically on Division 1 level, is now going to go up to 105. That's going to be a very finite number. They may seem to be more opportunity, but it truly really isn't, because these guys are all getting scholarships now. So they're going to want their money going towards something that they have an ROI on. So maybe these athletes, like I said, start to look to Division 2, Division 3, and then the money starts to follow. That's ultimately what my thought was with digging into all of these things as much as we do here at Athletes to Athletes, is just thinking, okay, these are what the headlines are. This is what the legislation is. This is what the court case is saying. How are these going to affect not just the Division 1 level, but will the money start to follow into the Division 3? Because having it, getting money for academics is great. Those are some things that I was able to partake in. but having an athletic scholarship would have been even better, so that's why I always wonder how much are Division III coaches truly paying attention to these things. Is it something that they're keeping in the back of their mind, or is it, something that they just kind of let happen because they know it's, not really in their purview right now, at least at this point, to truly know about it. But it's good to hear from you that there are some Division III athletic programs that are partaking into NIL and that are looking to get these opportunities for their athletes. Um, because it is, no matter Division I, Division II, Division III, it is still a full-time job to be an athlete. It really is. I was fortunate enough to have some work study jobs and to be able to work in the writing center and edit papers as a aspiring writer back then in '07. But that was something that I was able to squeeze in between going to class, having film study, trying to get enough food in me during the day before going to practice, and then having to go to the gym and everything else, right? So there's a number of things that, you know, are a factor and play a big role in every single day of a college student, no matter what division your sport is. So, knowing that there are some Division III athletic programs that are looking to NIL to help these students, that's huge. And I love hearing about that. And, hopefully Wilkes will be one of them that starts to dig into this a little bit more. And, as the city continues to grow, maybe there's more NIL opportunities and maybe, more organizations of the alumni start to grow as well. There's a number of alumni that I speak to that have their own companies now and would probably love to give back to Wilkes too. So hopefully on some level those things start to happen. And, but, going back to my original question, I was really curious to see what sort of time and attention is being paid to the things that aren't really being spoken about for Division III athletes. That is more Division I. And, so it's interesting to see kind of what your view is on it, and not just yours, but like at least get a little bit of perspective of how much you guys are really even paying attention to it. Right. So, that's the interesting part for me. But I want to transition to one other thing before I let you go. And that is your goals list. Obviously, you're back at Wilkes, so your goal is to get the best recruits you can, and really shape and mold these athletes for the next level. But when it comes to you, something that I learned about you from that first conversation that I spoke about, I'm going to bring it back around, is you were very goal oriented even as a young cat back in the day. When you and I spoke, I'm like, this is someone who hasn't figured it out yet, but I know he's going to, because of how goal oriented he is. How do you place your goals as well as the goals that you want for your student athletes? How do you weigh and measure them, and how do you bring them together? Right. Because as former athletes, and something that I know you do as well as me, is you will always identify as an athlete. You may be a coach now, but you live a disciplined life as an athlete. That's something that never goes away. And I can speak to it as well. I'm in the gym every day. It's something I speak to. I'm regimented, disciplined. It's the number one thing that I got from Wilkes, and the number one thing I got from being an athlete while at Wilkes. So when it comes to your personal goals, as well as the goals that you have for your athletes, how do you merge them, and how do they work to allow you to progress down the line, not just as an individual, but also as a coach and also as a leader of men?
That's a great question, and I'll kind of pivot because you impact a lot there. So I'll pivot to one little thing to close the loop on the legislation stuff. But the NIL, I mean that's why this stuff is happening, right? Because there's not infinite money, right? So like NIL is obviously taking shape in a really a significant way at the Division I level, and now obviously this court case is obviously discussing the opportunity to, or athletes' employees, or the school going to pay them directly, or and then obviously that has led to these roster caps and or higher number of scholarships to maybe offset some of the the conversation around making athletes employees and so obviously in NIL and Division III, like when I said departments, I guess their athletes are kind of taking care of themselves better rather than departments facilitating that, because departments actually can't facilitate that. But so that's kind of what I meant there. But I think Division III will continue to pay attention. I hope they do, right? I mean, I think the obviously the people making decisions are obviously going to be paying attention, and any forward thinking coaches, I think, are going to be paying attention and try to get ahead of it based off the existing resources they have and what they can leverage potentially. But yeah, I think we're going to continue to see it affect all levels. Obviously, one of the things that we can't lose sight of in Division III, unless this changes, right, is that the Division March Madness essentially funds Division III championships, right? So we division, we all kind of are, and this is no secret, right? You can look this up. Like the Division I March Madness is basically all the shares from revenue share from that is distributed down to the Division III championships. So when COVID happened and March Madness wasn't happening, that affected not just obviously those programs not involved in March Madness, but obviously affected the future of or maybe the quality of some of the Division III championships for the following years, right? I know Division III wrestling just got more qualifiers, and maybe that's partly because we were able to have March Madness happen successfully the last couple of years after COVID, right? So now we got more qualifiers. Now that it always comes down to the bottom line, right? So it's crazy how interconnected it all is. If any Division III coaches aren't paying attention, they probably should, because it definitely affects it affects their work, right? So how much can we do about it? I don't know, right? We put in our feedback and surveys and tell our decision makers what we think, how things should be voted on or whatever. But but I think it's worth paying attention to, and to control what we can control, right? And then sorry for pivoting to I'm sorry, what the genesis of your question was around?
Yeah, so around your goals as an
Goals.
individual, and then
Okay.
your goals as a coach, how do you weigh and measure them, and how do they drive you forward, right? Because like I said, one thing I know about you is you're looking to be not just the best coach, but also the best person, right? And a lot of your goals and the things that you want, I know they always coincide, and I know they always kind of smash their heads together when it comes to your goals list. So how do all of those things kind of intermingle, and how do you push yourself forward as a young coach? It still has a lot that you aspire to be.
Yeah, thanks for reiterating that. And then, I think that's important, because I think that's evolved over time, because when you were generous enough to give me your time back in 2016, that was like that phase where I was like, super just tunnel visioned on making sure I set myself up for a great career path. And now, not that that's changed, right? I'm still in this process of continual improvement and trying to improve. But I think what has changed is I tried to, at least, or I think I've taken off the blinders a little bit more, and kind of appreciating the periphery a little bit more. And still in my 20s, right, as it's kind of rounding up that, I'm like, man, there's a lot, even talking about all those stops, I'm like, man, the relationships and the great people I met along the way, and the great things I've learned along the way, like that's really what a lot of this is about, right? So and those are the things that are sustainable, and I really cherish a lot of those relationships. I cherish a lot of the experiences, and that process, going through that process of improvement with a lot of whether that's different members of the coaching staff or different athletes or whoever it is. So I've kind of maybe shied away from, or kind of steered away from, like, hard fixed goals as maybe what I used to kind of do as an athlete. And now I'm just have, like, this maybe process focused of just applying certain principles and values on a daily basis, and letting things kind of unfold as they may, right? Because what I've learned kind of early coaching is that things don't happen as quickly as you want them to, and a goal you could have set out for yourself from an outcome standpoint might take 10 years, and and that's okay, right? Or it might take 5 years, or it might take 5 months. So I'm trying to kind of apply a more process focused mindset with just continual improvement and applying certain principles and values around coaching and leading, and just my daily lifestyle. They're going to make me enjoy the periphery a lot more, because I think I had a little bit of a tunnel vision, which wasn't a bad thing, because it got me going, right. And now I feel like I'm at a place where slow down, breathe a little bit, and really enjoy all elements of the experience, even the ones that may seem like they're not contributing towards the goal, so to speak, which is obviously developing great athletes, and making sure we're leading them to success, and winning championships, and developing great teams, and surrounding, engaging the community, all those things, right? But I'm really trying to enjoy that periphery a lot more. And I'd say there's a set of core values that, like I said, you try to just apply on a consistent basis. Always just, Coach Lonseiler says this all the time: just do the right thing, and you'll never be wrong, right? So that's one of the things that we've always learned as athletes. That was instilled in me, and so it's always, always do the right thing, and be courageous, and in situations where you're not gonna you may not be familiar with, or maybe uncomfortable with, right? Have composure and patience through decision making, especially as a coach, because your decisions affect a lot of people, right? And have character, and that means being grateful for the opportunity, and if you're grateful for the opportunity and the people around you, then you're going to have a lot more of a productive perspective and energy that you're giving off to others. That and it's kind of crazy, and like as an athlete, you're kind of focused on yourself, but then as a coach, you're focused on everyone else, and all eyes are on you all the time, right? It's so you got to be really grateful, because everyone's watching every little thing you do, right? Mm-hmm. And that affects your temperament, and so you gotta have a good temperament, if you can help it, right? You can't control everything, and people that don't like you aren't gonna like you. People that like you are gonna support you. But you always got to be yourself, so to speak, right? But having a good attitude, and being grateful for the opportunity and people around you can certainly shape your perspective and energy in a much more productive way, in a much more tasteful way, and that way you're also making sure you're able to reach the people that you're trying to reach in an effective way. So I'd say that's kind of the goal. And from a standpoint of working directly with athletes, I get inspired by the guys who work with all the time, because I think they're probably a little bit more tunnel visioned, right? And they're so focused on developing their minds, their body, their spirit, and that's something that's really good to be around on a consistent basis. Because even though I love being an athlete, it's been 7 years since I've been an athlete, so you're a little removed from that mindset unless you put yourself in it on a daily basis, right? So that's the beauty of being a wrestling coach, right? You can hop into practice and roll with a guy for a whole practice, or do an individual session and spar with them, and get an understanding of what they're feeling and going through, and not just tell them about it, right? So and I think that's the beauty of our sport, maybe in relation to some other coaching, some other sports. You can't always get in there in some other sports. You kind of got to direct and lead more. At least in wrestling, you can get hands on, and get a feel for what guys are thinking, or how they're executing things, and talk them through it and lead them through it. So So you get to put yourself back in their shoes, minus the weight management part. You don't have to, we don't have to do that, but we can all help. We can all benefit from some of the nutritional principles that we tell our athletes to apply, right? So yeah, so that's kind of how I approach it from a mindset of being, I'd say, goal oriented is definitely true, but maybe the nature of the goals have changed a little bit, and not as outcome maybe focused as maybe I once was or thought to be.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a great conversation. I always love any chance we get a chance to kind of catch up, either get on the phone when it's not even recorded. I think this is probably the first time that we've recorded any conversation that we've had. And it's no different than, any other time. So I appreciate it. Like I said, I love the fact that you're back rocking the block W on your chest again. Loved seeing you at the helm at Penn College, but there's just something different about, having a Colonel rep for the Colonels. So, but overall, like I said, I'm super proud of you and everything that you've done, from that first phone call that we had to today, when you're, right back on Wilkes University's campus and, putting more energy back into all the things happening on River Street, the better half of River Street, I should say. So, like I said, man, it's been always an awesome conversation, and looking forward to seeing everything that you guys create while you're back on campus and doing some really cool things with Slogger. So, like I said, again, really appreciate it. Really happy for you, and looking forward to seeing everything you do.